we can be proud of our Irish Defence Forces in this region, in this issue, and working in the various areas where they work with UNIFIL usually. They are taking a lead in gender-based violence, in gender issues generally. I think, talking to one of them earlier, the Nordics are out there, as we would expect, Sweden and Finland, but Ireland is right up there. And it is great to be able to say that and to say it so publicly. And I know people who've worked with them on the ground have consistently praised their attitude towards gender issues on the ground and the way they are leading within their UNIFIL forces on the ground. And I'm delighted to welcome Jayne Lawlor, who is the gender advisor to the Irish Army. Jayne has worked on the ground in places as different as Lebanon, Liberia, and most recently in Afghanistan. And she's now going to talk to us on sexual and defending, supporting, protecting the vulnerable in conflict and post-conflict situations.
Good morning, sirs, ladies, gents. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Consortium for inviting me here this morning to address you. But I think even more importantly, I'd like to thank both Dervla and Salome for their presentations. I think after watching the video, and I saw it earlier as well, it's hard to articulate the helplessness, I think is the word I would use to describe how I felt when I saw it. It's hard to comprehend just how widespread gender-based violence and rape is, how it is used as a tactic of war. I mean, we all know it, we all hear it, we see it on television, we read about it in the papers. But I think a video like that really drives it home and brings it back to us. And from a personal point of view, what it's done is it's given me the impetus to continue my work that I've started about a year ago. It's given me a drive, a personal drive, to try and make the Defence Forces better, to try and make them more aware of this issue, and to try and ensure that even though we're a very, very small organisation, that we can try and make a difference on the international stage. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. As Bride already said, I'm the Defence Forces Gender Advisor. It's a new appointment. It was only brought into existence about 12 months ago during the reorganisation of the Defence Forces. And like much of the public service, the Defence Forces were downsized. However, the general staff actually prioritised the area of gender. And what they did was they made my appointment. I said it hadn't existed before, so it was a brand new appointment that was put into place. And my appointment is with the HR branch in the Defence Forces headquarters. So it is at the highest level within our organisation. So when I was volunteered in my absence to speak today, thank you, Colonel Barber, that was fine. I kind of had an idea about what I was going to talk about. And then Deirdre sent me an email and she asked me for the title of my talk. And that really, really got me in a quandary because I didn't know what my title was going to be. That was harder than actually putting my thoughts together. So I was sitting in my office and I was waiting for divine inspiration to hit. And next thing I saw one of the posters that we have, and it gave our tagline, the Defence Forces logo, which is defend, protect and support. And I kind of went, that's it. That is my title, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Defend. Some armies, they fight wars. They train to fight, they train to kill. We do. That's what we are. We are a military, we are an army, and that's part of our job. However, when we deploy overseas, we generally don't deploy in that role. We tend to deploy as peacekeepers, as peace enforcers. And I think because of that, we've gained a certain expertise in this area that other militaries don't have. And I think a lot of it, people say the military is reflective of your society. And I think the Irish military are very reflective of the Irish society. And by that I mean that, let's face it, the Irish have the gift of the gab. They're great to chat, they're great to get out, they're great to talk to people. They're great to get on the ground and to actually make contact with people. For years we've seen it in where the Irish have operated, be it in Lebanon, be it in Kosovo, wherever we are across the world. You'll always find the soldier, when they're out on patrol, they're the first to stop, to pull into the villages and to actually have a cup of tea with the locals and to ask them what's going on. There's a few reasons for it. One is, I think, because they're there to keep the peace, they don't have the same fear of the security situation. Yes, they know that they're in a dangerous situation. However, they're more likely than other nations to stop and actually talk and to find out what the situation is on the ground, to talk to the local population and to try and get feedback and to get their stories. And actually by doing that, what they're doing is unconsciously they're helping to protect themselves. They're helping to protect the rest of the Irish or the rest of the force that are there, because they're talking to the women as well as the men. You'll find some of the nations that we work with, the soldiers won't engage with the female population. It's just maybe through their own cultures or through a learned society that they're in. But the Irish soldier is very good to stop and chat. And because we have full integration, we have female soldiers at the tactical level. So when we go on the ground, the girls are there. They're at the front line. So it's very easy for the girls in certain cultures like Lebanon and Afghanistan, where we would operate, where maybe it's not au fait for the men to talk to the women. We have girls integrated. And they're able to talk to the females, and they're able to get the feedback from that population. So we're actually getting the full picture on the ground, as opposed to just getting the small minority, or well, not small minority, but the male viewpoint, shall we say. When it comes to protection, and this I really think is where gender-based violence and the Irish Defence Forces kick in, we're there to protect. The Irish will always deploy under a UN mandate. But most recently, in the last 10 years, UN mandates have always included a clause that talks about the protection of the local population. Previous mandates didn't have it. Now we do. I think as the Irish, we did it. We saw it as part of our job, that we were there to protect the community. But not every military had the same viewpoint. Now it's implicitly stated that part of our role when we deploy is to keep the peace, to enforce the peace if necessary, but we're also there to protect the local population, be it men, women, boys or girls. So I think it's very important now that is there, that the UN have taken that into consideration. But it is something that we would take very seriously. And I think by protecting the local population, we look at prevention and what we can do to help prevent gender-based violence in this area. And when it comes to supporting, we're there to support the local population, be it on the ground with projects. I mean, in UNIFIL, we work with the Finns over there in Lebanon, and we're actually on the ground, and we're there historically over 20 years now. And we're actually looking to support the community. So what can we do? And generally, we have what's called CIMIC, they're civil military teams. We send them out into the local population, and we try and actually, and I don't know if it's a conscious decision, but for some reason, most of the projects have tended to be geared towards women and children historically. So going back to the early 80s, we were involved with orphanages that were geared towards women and children. We're geared towards looking after, the current project is an agricultural project to help the local women, so that it's giving them a source of income within the local community and trying to enable them to make money for themselves. So again, it's something that we have been doing. Okay, so if I bring it back to this time last year, I was made the Defence Forces Gender Advisor. I had absolutely no background whatsoever in this area. I'd heard 1325 being bandied about. I knew the general gist of it. I didn't know the specifics. So I went over to Sweden and I did a course over there. And as has already been stated, the Nordic countries tend to be in the lead in this in a lot of areas. But it's fine getting the theory. And it's fine having a policy. And it's fine having a general idea about how we can make the world a better place. But what I needed to do was to bring it home to the soldier. So I can be in Defence Forces headquarters and I can come out and I can write papers and I can write policies, but that's not going to help anything. It's not going to change anything. So what I tried to do was come up with a policy that was going to hit the policy at the top level, so we could change our way of doing things at the top level. I could talk to the top leadership, engage with them and try and get them to bring the ideas down. But more importantly, I felt I needed to talk to the soldiers, to the actual men and women who are going to be going to these areas, to talk to them, to make them aware of the issues surrounding gender, surrounding gender-based violence, human trafficking, these areas. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be interfacing with the community, they're the ones who are going to be talking to the community, and they're the ones who will be in a position to help at the lowest level. So I've tried to focus it as much as I can at that level as well. So what I did was I wrote a Defence Forces action plan. It takes a lot of the objectives that are in the National Action Plan, but it brings it down to our level. And obviously, as a good military, we love the who, what, when, why, where. So I did that. I said, okay, let's make it into a military document. The Chief of Staff signed it. That's it there. The Chief signed it, which means it's now his vision. So the tasks that are in there, if somebody doesn't do it, I can turn around and say, well, the Chief of Staff, the highest person in our entire organisation, has said that you must do this. And he's also told you have to have it done by a certain time. Right? So if you don't do it, I'm just going to go back and say, tell tales and say you haven't done what you're supposed to do. So for me on the ground, trying to implement something, to have that support at the highest level has been fantastic. Okay, so the main pillars that I've used, I've stuck to the pillars in 1325, and we talk about prevention. And we're talking about prevention, and I'm trying to make it specific to gender-based violence and where we've tried to fit it in, because the whole way through the action plan, through the tasks, gender-based violence is interwoven within our plans. So we're talking about increasing participation is the first one. We need to increase the number of females in the Defence Forces, because by increasing the number of women in the Defence Forces, we're going to increase, hopefully, the amount of women who get to leadership positions. We can then instigate policy changes at the highest level. And if we do that, we can make it more, we can bring the gender perspective into the Defence Forces more. The other side of it is if we have more females in the Defence Forces, we can deploy more females overseas. And it's been proven, there has been a number of different cases. I've recently just returned from Afghanistan, and there was a very, very thorough study conducted using Afghanistan, and they used what was called provincial reconstruction teams, PRTs. And it's a NATO mission, so NATO went in and they examined and they spoke to a number of the PRTs. Some of them were from the Nordic countries, Holland, New Zealand, Italy. I can't remember some of the others, but there was a range of countries. And there was a huge variance in the level of participation with 1325. Obviously, the Nordic countries were particularly strong. However, other nations, the majority of them didn't even know what 1325 was. And what the study actually showed was that the countries who had integrated females into their troops, the ones who were using the females on the ground to gain the information, to talk to the local population, to liaise with the women, that the results that they were seeing, that the security situation in those areas, that it was more secure. It was a better model, it was working better. There are a number of reasons for it. One is they were speaking to all the population, they were speaking to the women, they were speaking to the men, they were getting the feedback, and they were able to then feed that in. But the other side of it is, the women are the mothers. I mean, we can't change it. We are the mothers. We want to protect. We want to mind our children. If we know there's an IED or a roadside bomb planted, we don't want it to be there that it can harm our children. Because I think it's something like 80% of roadside bombs in Afghanistan kill the local population. And then it's a huge percentage of that are killing the children, because the children, they're not aware of where the bombs are. I mean, this goes for other conflict areas, but I'm just using this as an example. So the mothers are hesitant to allow their children to become collateral damage, of a conflict. So a lot of the intelligence reporting is found to be coming from females, from women on the ground as well. And unless we have women in the Defence Forces, in militaries across the world, to actually get that information, we're at a loss, and we're not doing our job properly. If we talk about prevention then, how can we prevent gender-based violence? What can I do on the ground? What can I get my soldier to do? How can I make my soldier more aware? Or what can they do? What tools can I give them to be able to try and prevent gender-based violence on the ground? And I think the video, the bit for me that I kind of went, oh no, was when you see the soldiers. And because people associate soldiers a lot of times with the rape and the gender-based violence being perpetrated. And having served in Liberia, I remember we spoke to one of the UN agencies, and we were tasked with actually securing their compound during a riot situation. And when I tried to, I was the first commander on the ground, and when I tried to liaise with the person in the in the UN agency, they refused to talk to me because I was military. And I was like, but I'm here to try and help you, and but there was just no talking. I was the enemy. Once I was wearing a uniform, regardless of what country I was, regardless of what my own views were, I was absolutely the enemy because I was military. And I think that's something that we need to get past and get over, and we need to work together. And that's why the Consortium is great, because we are a collaboration, and we're a consortium where we're here to try and help each other. But just from that point of view, so what can we do? What we can do is we can make sure that our training, our awareness and our training is top class. So now what we do is that every person who comes into the Defence Forces, whether it be at other rank or officer level or cadet, that from the minute they come in, they will be trained about gender awareness. They'll be trained about gender equality. They will be given a gender perspective. The exercises that they do from the very beginning of their training will have a gender perspective in them. So what we're doing is we're institutionalizing it, we're formalizing it, but we're making it the norm. That it's not something that they consider as an add-on. A gender kind of issue isn't something that, oh, there's a gender issue, someone was raped, let the girls handle it. We're trying to get away from it. We're 94% males. The males have to do this. This is part of their job as well. So that's what our training is trying to do. So when they get it on induction, but the entire way as they move through their careers, that at every career course that will hit at certain levels, that gender message will be there as well. And we're talking gender awareness, we're talking gender equality, we're talking about 1325, but we're talking about gender-based violence. And it's specifically mentioned that gender-based violence will be there hit at all key periods. And in order to get promoted to the next level, you have to do your career courses. So as they're being promoted up the line, they're becoming more senior in their careers, they're being hit with the message over and over and hoping to drive it home and make them more aware of it. Pre-deployment training for overseas is something we take very, very seriously. And obviously the people that we're training to overseas are going to be actively involved. So our pre-deployment training, we've always done it, we've always talked about human rights, but we've actually gone further. We've taken gender and we've made it an absolute separate module. So now gender awareness, gender-based violence, human trafficking, they're all there. And what we're trying to teach the soldier, and the message I'm trying to get across, and I actually asked Ursula if I can borrow her video, because I think I can talk for an hour, I can use 1,000 words, but if I show that video for 10 minutes, I will get the message across to the soldiers, and I can try and make them feel, empower them to know that they can make a difference. Just the one person on the ground, either by reporting something, by stopping something, by being present, by protecting the community, by getting information that can lead to stopping gender-based violence. And that's the message I'm trying to get across to them. I recently trained some of the soldiers before they deployed to Mali. And we're part of an EU mission in Mali and also in Somalia. And it's very funny that Salome mentioned about training the soldiers, and that's what the Irish are doing. What we're doing is we're going over to Somalia and we're going over to Mali, and as part of the EU force, we're training the local soldiers on the ground. So I'm telling our soldiers, look, this is what you have to be aware of, this is what you have to know, these are our codes of conduct, this is what the UN say. There is impunity, there is zero tolerance. And then they in turn are going to Somalia, they're going to Mali, they're going to Congo, they're going to other areas where hopefully the message will get across to other militaries that these and gender-based violence and rape is a tactic of war, that it is absolutely not acceptable in any shape or form. So hopefully we, even though we're a very, very small organisation and very small military, that we can try and use our influence. The other thing is when we deploy to Eritrea, to Chad, to Liberia, generally we're working in African nations with African Union countries. We tend to be, in a lot of cases, the only Western face, the only white face is what they say a lot of the time in the UN. And I think that it's a responsibility that we have to take on board very seriously, that we're there, we have our cultural norms, we know what right and wrong is, we know what we should be doing. But I think we have to get that message across, we have to show other nations that we really mean it, that we're not just saying zero tolerance just for the sake of it, that we actually really mean it, and that if they step out of line, if they cross the line, if they deviate from what they should be doing, then we will report it. And that's what I tell our soldiers, that there is a reporting mechanism in place. Use it. If that was your family, if this was Ireland, and hopefully that again is the message I'm trying to get across to them, and try and influence other militaries as we go along. And what we've done as well is the Defence Forces, they target, with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Department of Defence, we try and target certain appointments. So we might only have 7 people in Afghanistan out of maybe 100,000 at its max. But those 7 people were placed in headquarters appointments that we felt we might be able to make a difference. We don't always get that, but that's what we try and look for. And actually the appointments in Afghanistan are changing, and in January we will have a sergeant going into a role in the gender advisor cell in the 4-star headquarters in Afghanistan. So for us, that's just a small thing, but again, it's us trying to get our will across, trying to get our morals and our ethics across into other nations to try and, to get our message out there. And hopefully we can continue to do this. Okay, so protection. How do we protect the local population? What do we do on the ground? We have a Defence Forces Code of Conduct. Now, the UN have what's called the Blue Card. And what it is, it's their list of rules and regulations of what UN soldiers should and should not do, how they behave properly. And we kind of looked at it and we said, yeah, that's great. It's a great start, it's got great ideas, but we said it's not good enough for us. We don't think that it covers enough. So what we've done is we've made an Irish version, and each soldier deploying overseas has their soldier's card. And what it does is it lays out very, very boldly what they can and cannot do, what they must do, what we expect of them, and what will happen if they don't do it. There have been instances before where Irish Defence Forces personnel have not behaved as they should. There's no point in denying it, it's happened, but I'm thankful, and it's good to say that people were punished. People were publicly punished, And I hope to God that I am never involved in an organisation that would ever try and hide something like that or try and sweep it under the carpet. I think we've learned lessons from instances that happened in the past, and I'd like to think that we've become a better organisation because of it. Hopefully it won't happen. We'll wait and see. But if it does happen, we'll be there and we will take action. And again, that's covered under the second point there about people being held accountable for their actions. When we travel overseas under a UN mandate, even though there is zero tolerance, even though nations speak a good talk, the UN are powerless to do anything. If somebody is caught sexually abusing or using prostitutes, or somebody is using the 10-year-old girl on the checkpoint and they're buying her for food, which I've personally seen, if that happens, a nation is responsible for disciplining that soldier. So the UN have no involvement, or other nations have no involvement. We've no say in what other countries do to their soldiers. It's something then that we try and put pressure on other nations, and the UN are trying to put pressure. But for us, from the Irish standpoint, we take a very, very dim view of it. People are immediately sent home and are then subject to military law back in Ireland. I spoke about having a uniform reporting and sanctioning mechanism. And it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but actually on the ground, you have to have it. Because if a soldier feels that there is some information that they have, or they saw something that, that didn't sit right with them, that there is a place for them to go, that they know who they can talk to get the information up. And obviously then we have our ongoing engagement here with the Consortium. That's just very quickly, how are we introducing gender perspective into the Defence Forces? So, as I said, I'm in Defence Forces headquarters and I work with the generals. Basically, I'm the general's advisor. If they have an issue or they have a question about gender, they speak to me. But as I said, I can only do so much up there. So because of that, what we've done is we've put a gender advisor into each brigade or formation, into the Navy and into the Air Corps. So now I have somebody that I have my message up here, but I can filter it down to the next level down. However, that's still not enough, because let's face it, a brigade could have 2,000 people. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to put gender focal points into every single unit in the Defence Forces, into all our training institutions, and into all our lower level units. And the reason for doing this is to try and ensure that we have a gender perspective at the lowest level. So hopefully we'll have the message coming from the top down, but also coming from the bottom up. And what I'm hoping is that every training that's done, all the exercises that we conduct and the operations that we conduct, that the gender focal points are there and they have the knowledge and the awareness to be able to try and implement the gender perspective into what we're doing. So if, for example, we're conducting a search operation in Kosovo, which we did, that it's not an afterthought, that the Irish actually had the cop on to say, well, hang on, there's going to be women and children here in the house that we're going to search. So how about we send the girls in with the first person that goes in, so that once we break into the house, we then are able to bring the women and children into a separate room to try and stop any trauma from occurring, or to try and get a girl there to talk to them, to calm them down and tell them everything's going to be okay. It sounds so ridiculously easy, but it actually, in the military, things like that tend to get overlooked quite easily. Also, when we travel overseas, all of our units that travel now, so in Syria and in Lebanon, the chief of staff, so the second in command of the entire unit, is now the gender advisor of that unit. That person is sent over to Sweden to do the course, so they are fully qualified. And we also train gender focal points to be in each of the tactical units. So again, it's the same message. We're getting the gender message at the bottom, but we also have the second in command of the unit as a qualified gender advisor. So hopefully then, again, the message is going down, but also going up. But that too I see is at such an appropriate level of leadership that they're able to then engage with the local population at a certain level that's enabling us to get the message out and to try and increase participation of women within the community. And that's it. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.